Hi, welcome to another chapter of the series Free English Lessons. I am David Basantes Fierro, SLT, second language teacher. Today, we're going to have a class on past modals, or also known as perfect modals. This is a grammar class for level C1. So, let's start by reviewing or having a general understanding of the modal verbs. So, the modal verbs have two uses, primary use and a secondary use. The primary use of the modal verbs it's maybe the most famous or most widely known, especially for basic and intermediate levels, English levels, right? And so the primary use of modal verbs are advice, possibility, probability, permission, external obligation, internal obligation, and also future among the most important ones, okay? So in advice, we have should. We use should to give advices. To express possibility, we use can and could. Also, they are used for ability, right? Physical ability. Probability, we use may or might. Also, permission may. And permission, we use can, may, and some others as well. And the external obligation, it's when you're being somehow forced to do something, or you have to do something but it's not your internal desire. You have to and ought to. When you want to do something and you feel compelled to do something, that then you have to use must. Then you can use must. And finally, to express future, we have will and shall. Yes, there's a class to expand these uses, and this is not the main focus of this particular video, but it's good to have the context. On the other hand, we have the secondary use. The secondary use is mainly referring to the degree of certainty for assumptions. Basically, what is an assumption? It's something you don't know, but somehow you want to figure out, or you imagine a possible cause for something, or imagine a possible present situation, or a possible result for something. Anyway, so in that regard, we have past, present, and future, let's say, assumptions. So the secondary use, for the past, we use the past modals, also known as perfect modals. And some grammar books, you will see this title, past modals. In some other books, you will see perfect modals. But anyways, these are modal verbs used for certainty of assumption. And here we have a very simple example. For example, she didn't come. She must have had a problem. For the past modals, most of the time, we first set a context or a situation, and then we introduce the model or the past model, asserting an assumption of what might be either the cause or the consequence of the situation. So the past models, we have mostly, the most important ones, 5 types: impossibility, advisability or regret, expectation, uncertainty, and assumption. It is super important to remember that a past modal uses a modal verb with a present perfect sequence. So for impossibility, we have could or couldn't have. For advisability, we have advisability or regret, we have should, shouldn't, ought to, have. For expectation, we have should, shouldn't, ought to, and have. For uncertainty, we have may have, might have, or could have. And finally, for assumptions, we have must have. Of course, after these sequences, we have a verb in participle. You can do something similar for the present as well. Here we have a sentence. He won the lottery. He must be happy. So we are imagining a possible situation right here, but this is in the present. All the situations are in the past. Finally, we can imagine a future consequence or a future situation in the same way, assuming it with a certain degree of certainty. Anyway, for example, future natural disasters could be more dangerous. All right, so here referring to the future. So this is the introduction, this is the context of the class, and today we're going to focus on past models. We're going to expand and give more examples, definitions, and concepts for this part, past models. So let's continue. Also, it is important to know that the modal verbs have a T1 form and a T2 form. Sometimes we call it present and past, and this could be confusing. So we need to clarify or understand very well the difference between the past or T2 of the modal verbs versus the past modal or perfect modals. All right. So very quickly, here we have a list of all the modal verbs in positive and negative in this present form or T1. Now, it is important to notice that although these are present, many of them can actually be referring either to present or to future. So they are, the form is present, but the meaning can be present or it can be future. So when we say T1, we are not referring to the use or the meaning. We're just referring to the form of the modal verb. The same thing happens with the past or T2. Here we have the list of the modal verbs in T2 or past form. It's very important to notice that this T2 or past form or T2 is not necessarily for past actions. It can mean present or it can also mean future. So again, these past forms can mean past, can mean present, or can mean future. And finally, here we have the past modals. And this is the form that we use when we mean past actions. So I really want to emphasize the difference between past or T2, past form or T2, versus the past modal. So if you want to express a past situation with modal verbs, you have to use past modal or perfect modal. Let's just return quickly here. Here we have a short list when we present the modal verbs with the positive, negative, and then here we have the primary use and also the secondary use. All right, so we have a verb can in positive and cannot for the negative. For the verb can, we have three possibilities: cannot, cannot, or can't. And this means permission or possibility in the primary use. There is no secondary use for this. Another verb is the verb shall. The verb shall in positive and negative is shall not or the contraction shan't. and it means future when you are requesting for something, especially in first person, I or we. It's like, what shall I do, or what shall we do? It could be used for that. Shall doesn't have a secondary use. Now we have may in positive, and the negative is may not. And this in primary use is used for possibility. When you're going to use this for assumptions, this has a 20% of certainty. You are sure about something, but at 20% sure. Can, as you see, apparently is a repetition of the verb can, but this is for ability. All right. And again, we have can positive, cannot, or can't, right, for negative. And this one has a secondary use. It has a 50% certainty. Again, we continue with the modal verb ought to. In the negative form, actually, it is don't have to. And the primary use for this is internal obligation, and the secondary use is a 70% degree of certainty for assumptions. We have the verb will, and this negative form, it's will not or won't with the contraction. Sorry, here I need to correct the T. And this is used for future in the primary use. The secondary use of will is a 90% of certainty for any assumption. Then we have must. The negative of must is must not or mustn't. And this, the primary use is internal obligation or prohibition. And the secondary use is 95 or 100% certainty for assumption. This is the T1 list. Now we're going to check the past form, or T2 of the modal verbs. Could, which is the past from can, and you have could not or couldn't, and this, the primary use is possibility. The secondary use for assumptions is 20% of certainty for any assumption. Should, should not, shouldn't, this means advice in the primary use. An assumption, this would be 60% of certainty for an assumption. Might and the negative might not. And the primary use is possibility. The secondary use is 10% of certainty for an assumption. Now, the verb can for passability it uses the expression wasn't able to. So when you want to express a passability, don't really use could. You use was able to. It doesn't have a secondary use. Would is the next T2 modal verb. The negative is would not or wouldn't, and it expresses past habits. And it's also interchangeable with expression used to. It doesn't have a secondary use. There's another form for would, which again, the negative is wouldn't, and this is for conditional sentences, conditional cases. In this case, it does have a secondary use, and it has an 80% certainty for an assumption. And finally, we have might, and the negative might not. This means possibility in a primary use, and a 10% degree of certainty for an assumption. Again, it's important to remember this is the past form or T2 form of these verbs, but they don't necessarily mean past action. They can refer to the present or to the past or even to the future. So anyways, let's just move on to the next part. That's what I'm just emphasizing here. And now we're just going to jump into the past modals details. So let's start. We have the advisability or regret. Before I start checking this, I want to come back to the first chart I presented. So we're going to study this part, okay? Past modals in this sequence or this classification right here, okay? So let's start with advisability or regret. What is this? Advisability or regret is when something in the past you don't like what happened, okay? So you somehow want to change it or you want to express a regret. It's bad or you don't like it. For these sentences, it's common to present first a situation or a context, either in the beginning or at the end, and then we use the past model or the perfect model to express, in this case, regret. Let's check the sentence number one. I am completely exhausted. I shouldn't have watched that movie on TV. Number two, I'm completely exhausted. I should have gone to bed after the news. Number three, I told you, you should have studied more. Number four, Ben ought to have gone to the doctor sooner. Now, they say it will be a month before he's fully recovered. Sentence five, we should have left earlier. Now, we're going to be late. Number six, I shouldn't have eaten that last cookie. Number seven, she shouldn't have been angry. It wasn't your fault. So all of these are either regrets or kind of like advising a different situation. Let's continue to the next part, expectation with a 90 or 100% of certainty. Well, the degrees of certainty, according to different authors, books, and teachers, sometimes could be even contradictory. So anyways, here this classification presents a 90% of certainty, and for this you use should and ought to plus the sequence in present perfect, which is have and past participle. Okay, examples. Number one, Sandra studied really hard, so she should have done well on her final exam at OM personal. Or the example two, Sandra studied really hard, so she ought to have done well on her final exam at OM personal. So I have an expectation for something because I'm quite sure that's what was going to happen. Let's continue. We have impossibility. All right, impossibility. For impossibility, we use can't or couldn't plus the present perfect. The present perfect, remember, is the sequence have and participle. Let's check 7 examples. Again, also, I want to repeat and emphasize that for these examples, we first set a context either in the beginning or at the end of the sentence, and then we present the impossibility case with the past model. Sentence number 1. Where's my umbrella? I didn't take it to the office, so I couldn't have left it there. Sentence number 2. I know you love chocolate. I can't have it, so it can't have been easy to say no to that piece of cake. Number 3, I know you love chocolate. It couldn't have been easy to say no to that piece of cake. Number 4, Frank failed the exam. He can't have been paying attention in class. 5, Frank failed the exam. He couldn't have been paying attention in class. Number 6, they had a lot of work to do in a little time. They can't have finished everything. Number 7, they had a lot of work to do in little time. They couldn't have finished everything. So we have these situations, super difficult or extreme, and then something that we think it was impossible to have happened. All right, so that was impossibility. Now we go to uncertainty. When you are not sure about something, or maybe you're 50% sure. For this uncertainty, we're using may, might, or could, of course, with the sequence in present perfect, which is have and a participle. So let's check again seven examples, okay? Let's check this one. Where could Mariano be now? Maybe a lady says. Do you think he may have forgotten about our date? Do you think he might have forgotten about our date? Do you think he could have forgotten about our date? So we have may have, might have, or could have. They mean basically the same. Sentence number 2. I think it may have worked, but we gave up too soon. 3. They might have won if their start player hadn't been injured. 4. I don't know. It might have been different if you were there. 5. If it hadn't stopped raining, the party could have been a disaster. 6. She could have run faster, but she wanted to save her energy. 7. We could have bought a new car, but we decided to use the money to go on vacation. So this was uncertainty. And we got to assumption. When we are 90% certain about something, or 100% even sometimes, okay? So for this, we use must and present perfect. Remember, present perfect is the sequence have and participle. So here we present 6 examples, okay? So let's start with the number 1. It's freezing cold in here. Someone must have forgotten to close the window. Super important, and again, I repeat, I emphasize, to write examples for these cases of past models, we need to set a sentence of context first, and then we present or introduce the case for the past model, which is the perfect model, okay? Again, here is the context, and then we have the assumption or past model sentence. Sentence number 2, the lights are off. They must have gone out. 3, I never see John and Claire together anymore. They must have separated. Number 4, I know you love chocolate. It must have been difficult to say no to that piece of cake. Number 5, John never called you last night. Or John never called you last night? With a question intonation. He must have been working late. Frank, number 6, Frank failed the exam. He must not have been paying attention in class. All right, so this was the assumption. Remember that we present free online exercises in the description and some links. So if you're watching us on Instagram, you should go to the upper part, go to the title of the video, click there, then you will display the link for the exercises. And if you're watching us on YouTube or on Facebook, you could go down below, and then you will have the links. Remember to follow us on Instagram, subscribe to our series in IGTV. Also follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos. Right, see you in the next video. Thank you very much. Bye bye.